So this was Eric playing black and Hugh taking white. So all pretty straightforward so far. Nothing to really comment on. This feels like kind of a more modern variation, this H16 stone. I can't really fault it too much. I would imagine black would play here and white would just play here, which I think is, probably okay. But the only thing that I'll say here is it's kind of, if you change the order slightly, it's kind of like white plays here, black plays here, and white plays here, which the moves feel a little bit weird in that way. So, if I were white here, I would probably just, I think white gets a better result here than black does, because I think white's protected its weakness here, and these moves for black are not exactly that helpful. It's just connecting up. But it's probably fine, but it's something a little bit just odd that I haven't seen before. I think usually you'll see just an attachment here, or maybe a kick here. In this particular situation, I would probably, if I were black, play one more. There are slight subtle differences between playing at C11 versus C10. Does anyone know why you might play at C11 versus C10?
I'd say because of the cut on C13.
The cut on C13. Yeah, so that cut has to play with it. That's yes, you're definitely right. That cut has some element of it, but the real reason is actually because when you play this move, you're setting up for cutting these two stones from these two stones, from these two white stones at D16, C16, from these stones here. So let me go back a little bit. So this is kind of an old variation that I think a lot of amateur players played. And right now, if you were to cut as black, it would not work, because black would play here, white would play here, black cut. And there would be a shortage of liberties because white would be able to cut at this C13 position. So black would have to protect, and then white can play here, and white would be able to capture these stones before black would be able to capture these white stones. And so when you would play, typically the move would be to play here, which wouldn't really protect the cut, because again, white could still cut at C13. So you might see people occasionally playing instead at C12 or C11 to help prepare the cut. Now, the trade-off for preparing for spending an extra move to help prepare the cut is you're getting less territory than if you were to play at C10. Obviously, the variation's a little bit different because we had this extra stone at F17 in the variation. We had this extra stone here. So it is a little bit different, but because there's no cut after white's move at F16, obviously there's no cut here. Playing so close doesn't really make sense. We only play this way when we're fearful of the cut, or when we're preparing for the cut. We're not going to ever be able to prepare for the cut now. A very nuanced thing, but we're basically giving up points if we play something like this, right?
Yeah, makes sense. I feel like black could have done better there, right?
Yeah, I think so as well.
Yeah, I think after I played the different corner, I immediately was like, oh my God, if he plays E17, it's going to be tough. So I just immediately ran back, but I wasn't sure if I really owed that move or not. It just scared me.
It's hard to say. I think you could get away with. I think you can make an argument for playing elsewhere. I do think this is obviously a somewhat painful move, but it's not game ending in any way, right? Because if black tries to push through, then white will just play here and give up these two stones. Not that big a deal. The move you'd have to be more mindful of is white playing here, in which case this could be pretty painful. So
yeah, I assumed E17 would be Sente.
Yeah, I think that's probably a case. So yeah, so maybe playing at E17 first for white might have been a little bit more safe if black plays something like this, and then white can play away. Pretty similar result, but maybe different order. Interesting. I wouldn't have expected Atarian from below. I would have probably rather play here. And build up a little bit of outward influence. I'm not sure if allowing black to come out here is really the best thing, because now black has a pretty strong position on the outside. And yes, white does get a slightly larger corner, but not by much. I think the outward influence here might actually be worth more than the territory at this point. And obviously,
Do you know what kind of things that influence would be used for? Because I guess the reason I didn't play the normal move on the outside was because I didn't really see a clear use for that influence, and so it felt
sure.
I was arguing it was over concentrated,
So
or that I wouldn't be able to use it, or that black would be over concentrated.
So without going too far, and to say that it's definitely Aji, it's not something you can take advantage of right now. The first thing that I would think of is attacking this group. And by attacking this group, you're also creating some sort of weakness on these two stones in the lower left as well. It might not work right away if black were to play something like this. There's some amount of Aji here that you could potentially take advantage of. It's not clear it's going to work, but there's something here, right? This group isn't perfectly alive yet. It doesn't have two eyes. So there's something in this area where I would think, if I have a little bit of strength here and I make it hard for this black group to run away, later on I could potentially do something. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then I guess the other thing is that I'm not, if black played more like how you played, which I think would have been better with the net there, what that I wasn't sure what that strength black gets would be useful for, especially if I can follow up with M17 like in the game.
So M17 here. I mean, it would certainly make any white attack over here at the C9 much less effective, right? Because now black can always just run out to its friends.
I see. Okay, thank you.
And so it's a subtle difference, and I don't necessarily want to fault you for a big thing, but to me, so early in the game, these extra 4 or 5 points are not going to be worth outside influence. That's kind of the way that I think about it. But here, white ended up kind of getting the best of both worlds. Got a little bit extra here, and can always play on the outside whenever it wants as well. And black doesn't really want to spend the time playing here now, because it's a very slow move. It's not really attacking anything. The stone was already separate, so it wouldn't be that profitable for black to play here now.
Yeah, and sacrificing the stone is a cool variation.
And much less profitable for black to play here. This white group is perfectly alive. White could just play on the outside and be quite happy. Or even just something like this, just getting out and maybe sealing this black group in, and later on launching an attack against it, or even just playing away, right? Like white could certainly just play a large move over here, and again, black is not going to be able to kill this white group. It's white can get out, or white can just live locally as well. So these moves by black, I think, were also mistakes. So this move by G18 is probably a little questionable as well. So yeah, you correctly saw that you should be playing it elsewhere. I don't want to call this a mistake. You typically don't see a attachment when black has a stone at D6. Does anyone want to take a hazard a guess as to why? It's a very subtle difference, but why we don't typically see a D6 move? Oh, sorry, a D3 move. I'll take silence as a no. So
well, I thought I saw this in the Nongshim Cup or whatever, and it was like they're crazy complicated variations, and so I assumed the normal one would be okay. But like I thought this showed up in a Shinjin So game.
It might have. I would say, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying it's not something we see quite as often. And the reason is, and we can actually look at this pretty cleanly here. So I'm gonna have one variation where we have the low knights move, and one variation where we have the one space. If we do the exact same variation for both, I would argue one is better for black than the other. I would rather be this position here because I'm getting more territory. I'm at a
Okay,
higher
I see.
point
The
than
plan
here.
would be for me to cut rather than playing 7 there, uh, with the high stone, especially since I'd been pincered. I was just
Plan
trying to
would
get
be,
into the
oh, so
corner.
you're saying if something like this, you'd play here?
Yeah.
But even still, this is also not perfect because this high stone is still helpful here, right? It's not exactly a bad stone for black to have.
I see. Okay.
Whereas imagine the exact same variation with the low stone. We do the same thing we did here. Now when black plays here, I would kind of rather have the stone at the high position here, right? Because it protects any sort of peeping or any sort of cut here. Does that make sense? So in both positions, I think I'd still rather have the stone at the high position as opposed to the low one.
Okay. And so I guess can you after the pincer, I was thinking my options were either this attachment or 3-3 if I didn't want to either leave it, which I get into trouble, or jump out, which felt like it was good for black. What
Yeah,
options would you consider as white here?
I think 3-3 is perfect. I think that this is a totally reasonable result for white. There's also still quite a lot of aji here as well. If black plays here, white can now tanuki and take a large point either here or on the side or somewhere. And there's still cutting points that black's always going to have to be mindful of later. So I think the 3-3 would have been great. Typically in a vacuum, I'll say, not necessarily in this position when there's stones already here. The two moves that you see black play once that you have a one space approach or one space extension, excuse me, are either the 3-3 at c3, or sometimes you'll see a peep here at e5. And this is probably the two most common moves you'll see on this lower left corner when white has approached and black has played an extension. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly why. I think these are the ones that just get the highest results from the AIs, but it's probably the ones you'll see most commonly. Very rarely will you see an attachment here when black has a high stone, because again, it gives us a slightly better result for black than it does for black in the variation where the stone's lower.
Okay, interesting.
So let's keep going. Yep, totally okay. So I feel like this variation here is very much for black is very much trying to copy something black doesn't quite know. And when you look at this, what is black going to be able to get after all this? Well, what really black has gotten is a weak group here. So is this attachment move something that's played? Yes. Is this Atari here played? Is this move here played? Yes, all of these moves are played, but I think it kind of left something that, you have to figure out why these moves would be played. And I think that, you do it when maybe the outward influence that this white group would get is not going to be that big a deal. So if black had a bunch of strength over here, maybe black would play here and give up these stones, right? And play something like this. This might be what you're expecting, where this outward influence that white is getting is not going to be that good. But in the variation that black's playing here, it really just feels like black's giving away points. Right?
Yeah, I hadn't actually seen that attachment. I've only really seen that when M17 is a black stone.
Yeah, that's much more common. I agree.
So but even with a bunch of extra white stones, this is a good way to use corner aji to invade. I guess, can you show maybe what some other common moves are to deal with a corner like that? Like, I was thinking
probably
3-3.
R17 is going to be your most common one. You might you could, I mean, this is maybe older. I haven't really seen this, but something along these lines is also possible. If black Atari, if white Atari is on the outside, something like this might occur where you just, reduce how much white's getting in the corner. If white plays here, you might see something like this, where again, black's just trying to reduce how much white's getting here. And then of course you have the 3-3, which leads to all sorts of complications where, excuse me. It gets pretty complicated, but some variation in which black is reducing how much white will be able to get here. Because what black is really trying to prevent is white getting another move something over here that's going to make it so that all becomes white. Does that make sense? It's a pretty nuanced thing, and I think it's like very game dependent, but I do think that Q16 does exist and is a plausible move. I don't think I would play it in this particular situation, and especially in the way that black played it, because it just feels like black's giving away territory. I also just one thing for you here. I would also
I think I immediately regretted playing 015.
Yeah, no need to, right? If black plays here, just extend, right? And like, this is a pretty bad result. Think about this, if black played here now at P14, would you play here? No, you'd play something like this, right?
Yeah, I think that was sort of, I guess I was too scared of the cut Aji, but as soon as I played it, it felt like a bad exchange for me.
Yeah, definitely. But still, I mean, it's such a great result for you, it almost doesn't matter, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, if black, instead of playing 014, if black had played something like, I was worried about S17 or R18 maybe more. Like R18. Sorry, R18 I think was scarier.
The problem is black really doesn't have the time. There's not much really to worry about here. I mean, maybe black lives, right? That's kind of the fear. Is black get something here, but then you'll capture something on the outside potentially. Or you could also of course just block here, and it's only 3 liberties, right? So
yeah, I guess what I was worried that this would give black a big amount on the outside, or the other thing I was reading was that I can play S17 and it's like a overly complicated way to kill, but after R18, I think
after R18
S17 you play here? I'm able to kill, but then I was worried that black would get a lot from on the right side.
Well, this is actually really helpful shape to know. If you play a Q18 locally, this is dead shape, right?
Yeah.
Locally for black, it's dead shape, and so your fear here is, okay, well, can I kill black before black kills me, right? That's the fear.
Or can I kill without getting sealed in and getting attacked on the right?
Yeah, but had you just not made that exchange, you wouldn't have anything to worry about, right? Because now there's no way that black seals in without you getting something first.
Yeah, that's fair.
So let's just do maybe another 5 or so moves, and then we'll move on to the last game. Yeah, so definitely maybe a slow move at 014, right? And now you can see black struggling, right? Black is playing 1 weak group, 2 weak groups, 3 weak groups, where white has no weak groups, and so this is just going to be an easy fight for white. It's adding another weak group here to a fight that was already going to be bad for black. Again, adding another group, right? It's not clear to me that playing here would necessarily be good, because that allows black to kind of protect this weakness here, or kind of link up in some way. If I were white here, I'd want to preserve this weakness. Whether you play it now or you play it later, not quite sure, but that's kind of what I would be thinking of, is how do I preserve any sort of attack on this group?
That makes more sense. I felt like I mishandled the bottom right and kept worrying about the time it getting cut there, and whether that would be a problem for my 3 stones on the outside. So I sort of decided to cash in and try to attack the upper group.
You could have also maybe considered something like this, where if black tries to play here, then you get the corner. And if black tries to play the corner, then you can get an attack on these stones. This might be another way to think about it. You know, I feel like in this particular variation, you're giving a black a chance to attack something. And if black has any sort of a chance to attack something, you know, things are going to start happening where black actually starts getting territory, right? So that would be kind of my fear here. Obviously, this is not a bad result for white, because white still did get territory here, but now, you know, black's able to make some strength here. Maybe that's going to affect these 5 stones over here as well. So for me, I would be trying to keep the game a little bit simple. So maybe even just playing here would be okay, right? Just living would be fine too. You know, if black plays here, sorry, on the outside, play here, and just very simple variation would be totally okay here. You know, black doesn't have anything. Your corner territory, side territory, potentially corner territory, some corner territory. Black really only has a little bit here, maybe 30 points, and maybe 15, 20 points here. Everything else is white's.